Step into the ring of the unconscious. Confront yourself and win. This is Shadowboxing, a show about personal battles within.
Why do I have a lack of pens? Here we go.
Okay, let's pull up this Huber Dinky. Okay, you ready?
I am now.
Oh, congratulations. How are we doing the intro thing again? This hasn't been established. It's not canon yet.
It's not canon yet. Just say hi. Thanks for listening to Shadowboxing. I'm Nick, and this is Tyler.
We're gonna switch up who does it. Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
based on who reads the quote. I mean, I kind of just did it. We could leave all this in.
I know, that's hilarious. I do like the whole, organic feel that leaves.
Yeah, we can talk shit about the listeners too.
Oh yeah, they can't hear us.
Right.
Wait. No, that's not right.
Wait. Right.
I'm confused, Tyler.
I'm so... Just roll with it, man.
Okay. So, here's the quote. I can only think seriously of trying to live up to an ideal, to improve myself, if I am split in two pieces. There must be a good I who is going to improve the bad me. I, who has the best intentions, will go to work on wayward me, and the tussle between the two will very much stress the difference between them. Consequently, I will feel more separate than ever, and so merely increase the lonely and cut-off feelings which make me behave so badly. And that's good old Alan Watts.
Love that guy.
He's pretty sweet.
He just gets me, you know? Yeah. Yeah. I like that quote because, I think that I struggle with the concept of, wanting to improve all the time. But then it's well, who wants to improve? You know? It's he has another quote where he basically talks about, he's like, if you want to improve, he's like, well, then who's actually wanting to improve? Because if you want to improve, then you ought to know how you should improve. But you obviously don't know how you should improve, otherwise you would be improved. And it's kind of just pointing out the paradox. And in our minds, we have this idea of these are the good things we do and these are the bad things we do. And then we associate the bad things with, well, I don't want those to be a part of who I am anymore. You know?
Mm-hmm.
But, so I kind of think the quote really is about accepting all of you, even the parts of you don't like. Maybe. But also maybe a little bit more. It also, I think it has to do with this idea of don't get so fixated on self-improvement because, it takes you out of the whole experience. If you're constantly focusing on self-improvement, then you're basically focusing on this idealized future where you aren't doing the things that you see as negative and you're only doing the things that you see as positive. And in that way, you're kind of just projecting this idealized, a romanticized version of yourself that isn't real, that you wish you could be like. And then that just makes you feel sad because you're not that person. That's the person you want to be. It's not you. It's some idealized version of you that you would like to be.
Right.
You know?
Well, and I don't think that concept in totality is necessarily a bad thing. We can't remain dependent children forever, I guess. But I do see the point where I guess the other end of that metaphor would be you can't have a part of you that's also just this overbearing, judgmental parent.
Right. Well, it's
he constantly no, bad baby, you have to be better. You know what I mean?
Yeah. That definitely isn't healthy. One thing that I have worked on over the last couple of years, I'm much better at now, but I was horrible about in the past, was just negative self-talk. I even catch it in other people if someone goes, I'm so stupid, I did X, Y, and Z. that immediately sets off an alarm in my mind now, where it's like, no, don't do that to yourself, because like you believe that, whether you like say it in a nonchalant kind of joking way, like somewhere you're internalizing that negativity. And like you said, the idea of like you basically always being hard on yourself, that's not healthy. Because like imagine you would put it in the perfect terms, right? Like if you had a parent that was like that, imagine that kid is not going to be raised to be a functional adult. They're going to have clear neurotic like tendencies.
Yeah, you ain't just whistling Dixie, buddy. I can't speak about that at all.
It's totally foreign to me.
Why was I never good enough? But seriously,
could we talk about this? I'm in distress. I'm laughing, but I'm crying.
Yeah. Well, no, and yeah, the laughing and crying thing. What you were saying about the negative self-talk thing. I do that all the time. God, I'm fucking stupid. And it's offhand. But at this point it is habitual. And like Rosie's actually got onto me for that. She's like, you've said that like 3 times a day. Like that's enough. And I'm like, so occasionally it's okay. It's like a running joke. I'm like, or when you call me an idiot, it's okay.
If it comes from an external source, it's acceptable. Because it's
I'm sorry, Mom.
Point. Yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't do the dishes right. No, but for real, man, like, it's funny. You know, I've been talking to you for the past couple of days about like trying to drastically change my diet, and it's so funny going through like a drastic change. Like, what basically I did an elimination diet. And so many things about my mood, my energy levels, my outlook changed. Like my mood completely stabilized. Like I didn't have these like mood swings, these highs and these lows. I was always in ketosis for the past 2 days. So like my energy levels were solid and my appetite was non-existent. So I didn't have this strong desire to preoccupy myself with snacking. And what's interesting about it was like realizing I was like, oh, you know, a lot of the things that I get on myself about on the day-to-day aren't even me. It's not a result of my character that I struggle to accomplish the things that I want to. It could be as simple as like I have a hormone imbalance and the things that I'm eating are affecting it. And if I were to pay more attention to that and correct those things, then all of a sudden this eliminates a huge swath of issues for me. And that's like a good example of where like I was beating myself up for a while about like, why can't I be more productive? Why can't I accomplish the things I want to accomplish? And you know, like I'm still trying to determine if that's healthy or not, like wanting to be more productive. I want to be more productive for me because I like myself more when I'm productive, when I accomplish things rather than doing things that are kind of mindless or trivial.
Yeah, well, and I think that honestly comes down to, I mean, it can't be reduced entirely to, but there's something to be said about how like delayed gratification seems to give longer term releases of dopamine and probably serotonin, whereas, and you could associate that with productivity. Productivity is essentially delayed gratification, whereas an immediate thing, yeah, you get that, you know, instant boost, but it just doesn't feel as good, especially once you do it over and over and over again.
Right. Yeah. I think anything really that you do as far as like trying to indulge in something, it loses its efficacy, right? Like, the only thing that I can think of that's not like that is alcohol. Whereas, like, if you become a chronic drinker of alcohol, you actually lose your alcohol tolerance. So, like, really bad drunks, it doesn't take a lot for them to get drunk. And like, I noticed near the end of, like, my drinking experience, like, it was starting to get like that, where, like, I would be able to, like, at one point I was able to finish a bottle of whiskey over the course of, like, 8 hours, you know, in an evening, like a long evening. But then eventually it got to the point where I was getting hammered drunk on maybe a quarter of that.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And but beyond, but like other than, and I'm not sure why that is, but beyond that, like any other substance, whether it's sugar, whether it's an activity like video games or something, like eventually, like you need more of it to get the same experience from it, or it needs to be novel, right? Like if it's like in instance of video games.
Yeah, that's the big thing. It's got to be novel. Yep.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I don't know, man. It's just like trying to come to terms with who you are, including the negative, is not the easiest thing. Like one thing I kind of just settled on recently about myself is I'm a really selfish person. And that bothered me for a while, and I'm starting to realize that like it is something that I should try and mitigate. Like I shouldn't embrace my selfishness, but like I also don't need to beat myself up for it. Like just naturally, if I'm talking to someone about stuff, I always want to relate it back to me. And like I am very much focused on my enjoyment over the enjoyment of others. When it comes to like choosing activities with a friend or a partner or something. In things like that. And it's like, and I just realized, I was like, this is like something that I don't need to try and drastically change about myself, but little improvements here and there. Like if I catch myself and realize like, hey, this is selfish behavior, maybe you should ask the other person what they want to do, or maybe you ask them a question about themselves, or maybe, you just try and shift the focus a little bit.
I mean, there's a function of degrees there too. Like as far as the first thing you mentioned, relating conversations back to yourself, like I hate this, but I've seen that associated with like autism and neurodivergence, and I'm like, that's a Jungian intuitive thing in my mind, and what that is most of the time it's people being like, oh, I can relate to that. Here's my evidence, which I don't see as selfish. I mean, I'm inclined to do that too, because to me, just hearing the words like, oh, I can sympathize, or oh, I can empathize, that's empty. Mm-hmm. An example is like, I'm showing you that. So that's how I've always seen it. But there are people who are like, why are you trying to make this about you? And that has nothing to do with my intent when I do that. But
right.
Different perspectives, I guess.
Yeah, it's not. I mean, take it a step further though. Like if allowed, I will let a conversation be about me the entire time.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, I guess that's a little different.
Yeah, like I catch myself, I'll be in conversations and someone's just really good at asking questions and they're really inquisitive. Like I will basically just answer their questions and continue to talk about myself until the conversation dies away. And then I realize, I'm like, oh, you know what? They probably were waiting for me to ask something related to them. I should probably like shift the conversation to a different topic, maybe a neutral topic, or maybe a topic about them. But like, I'll just talk about myself for forever, man. Like definitely some narcissism in there. But
I'll take your word for it. You narcissist. God, that's another word I hate that's overused lately.
Just mental health terms are overused.
Oh, I know. It's shrink talk is what I call it at this point, where it's like everybody thinks they're a fucking armchair psychologist now, and it's like, dude, like you using those terms, it's gotten to the point where you're not like actually lending yourself more credibility because you're using the jargon. It's like what we talked about a couple years ago about how every like niche job seems to have this jargon, so there's an in-group. Well, now people are trying to do that, like fit in with psychologists and stuff, and it's like, dude, like sometimes what you call narcissism is just somebody not giving you your way.
Yeah. Well, I also think that like it's this kind of like air of superiority because people love to feel superior to others.
Yeah.
And if it's like, if I can demonstrate to you that I like am aware of psychological principles and I've done work on myself involving mental health, then somehow that puts me in a position where I can psychoanalyze you and tell you what's wrong with you, maybe,
yeah, and that might have worked like when it first became a fad, but now that it's a thing, it's just like people are mindlessly using the terms.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And it almost lends an air of like discredibility to me, where I'm like, like if you were talking about this in a way that seemed unique in terms of your learning about it and ability to convey it, I have much more faith in you than you just saying the same lines that I've heard a billion times from a billion other people.
Right. It just becomes a trope at a certain point.
Yep.
And then you can almost spot people just based on that alone. It's like, oh, I know what you're doing.
Yep. I know you're the narcissist.
Yeah. Not me. I'm way too humble for that. But yeah, man, I don't know. Like, I guess this whole idea about not beating yourself up and stuff, it's like, it falls back in line with the whole, like, you're not going to enjoy life if you're constantly looking to self-improve and you're constantly looking to try and make changes that you feel are necessary, because all of that is kind of based on this desire to be better. And then that attachment to desire is probably what's causing your problem. My issue is that when I think about like, oh, well, maybe I should just try and enjoy life and like smell the roses and like do the whole blah, blah, blah. Like, you know, oh, I don't care. I'm just here to have fun. In my mind, I associate that with my early 20s. And like, albeit I actually miss certain aspects of my personality during that time, there's so much of it that I don't miss. And like, I don't want to be so carefree that I'm not aware of negative behavior that I have, and I'm not like looking for personal growth. So there's clearly a balance that needs to be struck.
That's what I was about to say. Yeah, because like I've been thinking a lot about like my childhood and how like just that sense of wonder and enjoying things for what they were. Like I didn't worry about shit all the time. I miss that a lot. Mm-hmm. But on the other hand, like it can't just be, you can't just kind of coast. You know what I mean? The way the metaphor I see it as is you do always need to have a mountain you're climbing, but every step of the way you shouldn't be like, God, why haven't I climbed this mountain yet? Like it should be about the climbing of the mountain.
Right. Not so much the destination. Yeah. I
right.
get it.
And that keeps you from beating yourself up, while also I don't think the idea of wanting to be better is necessarily a bad thing. Like what else would the point of life be? I guess you could just be a pure ball of experience, but then, aimless, and that in and of itself could lead to things like genuine selfishness and stuff like that, where, your only motivation is pleasure.
Yeah. Well, I definitely think that you can split hairs on like very minute shifts in perspective where like I think that there's a case to be made that there's a difference between saying I want to be better versus I want to be the best version of myself. Right? And I think that that's kind of like what Watts is alluding to in this quote, is like implying that you want to be better means like I mentioned this before, like this idealized version of what you think you ought to be that you're not currently, versus saying like I want to do my best to be a good person today, and just focusing on like putting out positive energy, doing what you think is right versus what might be expedient or comfortable. And those are so close together that you could almost say, well, that's what I mean when I say I want to be better. But there is kind of this trap that you can fall into where if you claim to want to be better, then you're implying that there are parts of you that are bad. And then it's like, so what parts of you are bad? And if they're bad, like, and you don't want to associate yourself with those parts, then aren't you doing yourself a disservice by intentionally avoiding the acceptance of certain aspects of yourself? Like part of individuation in my mind is like reconciling all of yourself with yourself, right? So like the good and the bad, taking it all together. And like, like in AA, they say like, the serenity prayer, right? God grant me the ability to change the things I can and accept the things I can't. Like at a certain point, where do you cut the line where you're like, okay, these are things that I can change and these are things that I can't, and the things that I can't change, I'm going to be okay with. and I can find a way to integrate those into my life that is not going to be detrimental to my well-being or the people around me.
Yeah, I think that's the key right there. What you just said about integration, I suspect that the different aspects of everyone's personality in any given framework can manifest themselves in a positive way or manifest themselves in a negative way. Like someone can be so honest that they're tactless.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And seeing, that in terms of I need to be different or whatever, I need to be better would be like, you could say, well, maybe I need to be less honest. Well, no, maybe you need to be honest in a more constructive way. So you're still embracing that aspect of yourself. Just the manifestation is positive instead of negative.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, just applying effort in a different way.
Right. Without being like, essentially, I need to be a different person.
Right. Yeah, it's tough. I mean, it's tough to know, like, what is worth accepting and what is something that you need to make a conscious effort towards. But also,
I think experience, life finds a way. Like, you will get feedback somehow. Like, your thing about your diet, that didn't come out of nowhere. You weren't just like, oh, I need to eat better. Like, you literally feel better when you eat a certain way. There is feedback there.
Yeah.
And whether that feedback comes from your own body, it could come from that, little voice everyone has in their head saying, like, you realize what you did was actually, like, kind of fucked up. Or it could come from external social sources being like, hey, you're fucked up. Mm-hmm. But I do think we get enough feedback both within and without to let us know if those aspects of ourselves are being manifested positively or negatively.
Yeah, we definitely do, especially when it involves social interactions, right? Like, if you, hopefully, I shouldn't say it because not everyone is that self-aware, but like, hopefully you realize when you're amongst a group of people and they begin to not enjoy your presence, or like when a joke doesn't land well, or like when you've hurt someone you care about because you were not thoughtful enough about their needs or wants, like, hopefully you can pick up on those things.
Yeah. Well, and to that point, yeah, I guess I can't say like everyone knows that. In fact, most of us in our like teenage and early 20 years probably don't, but with experience, like there was something, I don't know if it was Jung I just read, but it was like, life really starts at 40. Everything up to that point is just research.
Yeah, I've heard that before. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, like, I guess what I'm really talking about in this instance is more along the things where, like I'm not sure that I'm happy with the amount of effort that I put towards any given thing, right?
I mean, that sounds like internal feedback.
Right. So it's like, okay, well, where do I draw the line? Like, do I say, okay, like, I feel like we talked about this last week, so maybe like you can tell me if like we did, but like basically if you just forced yourself to do everything that you thought was right, regardless of how you felt in the moment, like, and you did it 100% of the time, I think your brain would snap at a certain point. You know what I mean? Like, there are certain points where you're just like, look, I'm taking a break. Like, I'm not doing that today. Or like, I just don't care about this thing right now. And it's good to override that sometimes, like when you have chores to do or you have obligations to someone else. But, I don't think there's a lot of people. I would say most people probably don't have the capacity to just override it constantly all the time. Because you're talking about like, sociopaths, like CEOs that like are workaholics, or like the David Goggins types that are just like constantly out there suffering because they get something out of that. I don't know, man. Have you ever met someone who was super high functioning and like wanted to be like that?
Not in terms of like physical activity or anything like that, but I mean, both my parents are very like driven and just like always constantly on it. But
Like I
you
knew
know
a,
that they're deficient in other areas.
yeah, I knew a guy in the Navy who basically was like a total workaholic, and I actually knew a couple people like this, but just total overachievers, constantly working, like, you know, made rank really fast, always outperformed everybody else, and just thinking like, oh, like where do I get that energy, and what is it that I'm missing that could drive me like that?
Well, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if those people had shitty interpersonal relationships.
Right. See, and that's the thing is that, like, you know, as you get older, you kind of realize it's like, oh, these people probably don't enjoy that. Like, it's probably a compulsive nature. Like, they feel the need to do that, maybe because of poor interpersonal relationships, or maybe like poor self-image issues, or like, you know, maybe there's just like some type of maybe a rough childhood or something, you know, like.
Well, there was always the running joke in when I was with Bravo Company where it was like, you know, you do have to have some degree of that drive to become an officer at all. Because, you know, you got to go to college, you got to go to OCS, you got to do a bunch of things. Like, you have to have a lot more drive to be an officer than to be enlisted, let's say. So, you know, you'd have those COs where, like, it seemed like they were always holding people till 6, 7 p.m. to do dumb shit that was useless. And the running joke was like, he hates his wife and doesn't want to be home, so the rest of us are going to suffer because of that too.
Right.
But to one degree, it just looks like, oh, this guy's a real hard charger. But like that's never the entirety of the equation.
Right. I had a buddy of mine who used to do this awesome impersonation of our sergeant major, and he always ended every sentence with "makes sense." And he his running thing whenever he'd mimic him, the last thing he'd always say is he's like, "I joined the Marine Corps because I hate my father." Makes sense?
Yes, actually it does. It makes a lot of sense.
Actually that clears everything up. But yeah, so it's like one of those things where maybe you're not missing out because you don't have the willpower or capacity to do that. You know, at the same time, like this week I've been contemplating, it's like, well, maybe the problem actually has been all these external factors. Like maybe it's not so much I'm struggling with willpower. Maybe I'm just not optimizing my sleep patterns, my diet, my activity levels. Like there are other things, and I call them external, but I guess it is a mixture of internal, external, right? But like when I go to bed and what I eat and stuff like that, that probably is playing a huge factor. And it makes me wonder, it's like, have I really just been getting down on myself all this time? And if I have, has my desire to be better actually caused me to be worse in some ways? And when I say,
there's something to be said there. I think the starting point for anyone struggling with, you know, feeling like they're not doing enough or lacking a sense of purpose or anything like that, I think the starting point is to just optimize their physical health and their habits related to that. Diet, sleep, exercise, water.
Yeah.
Like that, and that's a great starting point anyways, because like I really don't know anyone who is super healthy who also struggles with a sense of purpose or feeling like they need to do more. Mm-hmm. And that alone tells me that like if you start there, maybe the answers just come to you. You know what I mean? Or maybe there is no actual answer and you're just so hormonally stable at that point that it's not even a worry anymore. You're just content.
Right.
With
like maybe you've just
what you're
moved
doing.
on. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny. I was talking to a mutual friend of ours today, and we were talking about like just how ungodly expensive everything's gotten, and how like, you know, so many people are single and they cook for themselves, and you know they work a 40-hour week and they do all these things for themselves that in a nuclear family you would have divided up amongst family members, right?
Uh-huh.
And so certain aspects of our culture have changed, and we're not changing all of the parts, so it's making things a lot more difficult. But in towards the cost aspect, I was like, you know, 30 years ago, going to a diner every morning on your way to work probably was the norm for a lot of people, and now it just seems so expensive to eat out for a single meal every day that just becomes unrealistic. And we kind of went down a rabbit hole, and I basically said, I was like, if you could just cut so many modern things out of your life and you lived like the year was 1970, you'd probably save a ton of money.
For sure.
And then we started talking about the mental health implications of that. And it's funny because I was thinking to myself while we were talking, I was like, if I just got rid of like all my electronics for a month, and like I imagine that would probably do me wonders in the mental health department. I was reading something the other day. Somebody was saying that they like basically took an electronics fast, and they stopped looking at their phone, and they stopped playing video games for like a couple weeks. Their attention span basically just like, they thought they had ADD or ADHD, and their attention span just rebounded. Yeah. And they were like, It's not ADHD. It's the fact that like my attention span has been diminished from all these like 30-second clips and quick article reads and like clicking on things and playing these mindless games.
That is exactly it. There is a reason that the whole like ADD, neurodivergent, autistic thing is such a big internet phenomenon. Mm-hmm. And it's because these chronically online people have the attention span of rabbits. They don't have some genetic disorder. The problem is literally what they're recording this shit on and posting it on. Yeah. The irony.
Yep. And it's just, and the thing is especially with electronics, like I can give up, like in the diet thing, right? I did an elimination diet. I can give up a lot of things, and I can rearrange my time and devote energy towards certain activities over others. But we're so plugged in anymore that like you can't 100% get away from all of it. Like, you certainly can't eliminate the temptation. Like I can't just be like, I'm going to go give my computer and my TV away and just read books, because it's like, well, your job is so dependent on a computer nowadays. I mean, depending on what you do, but like to find a job, you need a computer anymore, really. It's funny, man, to tell a little story. I remember one time when I was in the Navy, we were getting ready to go on leave, and they wanted everyone's cell phone numbers, and they were saying that they were going to do like a recall during leave just to check on everyone, make sure everyone's got their phones with them and stuff. And like one guy raised his hand. He's like, yeah, I'm going to be out in the woods while I'm on leave and just won't have cell service. So like, what do you want me to do? And like, they didn't know how to respond to that. They were just like, what do you mean? Like,
well, what the fuck did you guys do 20 years ago before cell phones? How about that?
I shit you not. I asked my chief, I go, hey, what'd you guys do before cell phones? And his response was, he goes, what are you talking about? And I go, before cell phones, how did you get a hold of everybody? And he just like didn't have an answer for me.
Jesus.
And I was like, okay. Like I think we create a lot of our own issues with technology, right? My last job, I basically was always on call. Like they were like, if we call after hours and like something has happened at work that you need to come in for, we need to know that you can come in, mind you, they were like, well, within reason, like, if like, but I would have to tell them if I'm like, hey, I'm going to be gone this weekend. I'm going to be out of town. So if the range goes down, because I worked at a gun range, I was like, if the range goes down, someone else has to respond. I'm going to be 3 hours away. And it's like, that's like totally outside my job description. And that basically puts me on call all the time, which I wasn't getting paid for. But it's like, what did people do before you could just call everybody? You just dealt with things. Like if something happened, you couldn't just call your boss and be like, hey, I need you to come in. I don't know what to do. You just figured out how to fix it. Or you didn't do anything and you got fired for it. But like people just kind of learned how to adapt without having a constant lifeline attached to them all the time. And I just imagine that like, I think we'd probably all be better off if like that was something we could reduce.
I mean, there's good reason that a lot of, our, I guess, ideological peers have this fantasy of, living on a plot of land with the other people they care about and like trying to be as self-sufficient as possible. But I think part of what drives that is that natural, we evolved without this constant electronic connectivity for the vast majority of human existence. Like there's still something there that calls to us about that.
Yeah.
This is all very recent.
Yeah, I saw a meme today. I almost sent it to you. I don't know why I didn't, because it's totally topical. But it's like this meme where somebody asks someone, they go, "Aren't you supposed to be at work?" And the person goes, "No, I'm supposed to be in a little rural village with like 150 other people that I can rely on, all in walking distance, and like, you know, working in a field all day. That's where I'm supposed to be." And you too. Like that's where we're both supposed to be, but we're not. Like our brains aren't. Yeah, we are driving around in like machines that are far beyond our comprehension. Essentially, I'm not talking about cars. I'm just talking about like the vessel of society. Like things are so far advanced, and our lizard brains just haven't caught up yet.
I'm supposed to be naked in a grove of trees singing songs to Odin.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Or like Lieutenant Dan, I was supposed to die here. like I have a friend who like I was just talking to this weekend. Like he's going through some shit. And like basically like he went to Afghanistan, he saw combat and stuff, and he basically started seeing a therapist and told me he's got PTSD, and he kind of already knew that, but he's like the hardest part is he's like at one point like I had kind of already determined that I probably was going to die, and he had mentally prepared himself for that. And he's like, now it's like I'm years past how old I thought I'd be when I died, and he's like, and it's just getting weird because like I don't know what to do. I never thought this far ahead. You know?
Yeah. I mean, God, I've even heard that from people who never saw combat. Like, I was at D20 the other day, and there's a kid there. I think he's like 28. He's like, I thought I'd be dead by like 25. And I'm like, God, that is depressing.
Right. But I think that that's just kind of part of our, like, our as, you know, being men, our biological imperative is that, like, we're supposed to die in combat at some point. Like the majority of our ancestors were, like, dying while trying to protect their families, or like dying in service
pump out
to the
like
king.
7 kids by the time you're 22, and then you die fighting the tribe next door.
Yeah, exactly. So like there's probably some kind of like collective unconscious kind of biological mentality going on there, where it's like, okay, this is my biological clock's ticking, like I need to have my head bashed in by an axe or something at this point. I don't know, man.
No, and I mean, that definitely does seem exclusive to males too, because you think about like, I honestly wouldn't be surprised if that's part of the mentality behind crazy mass shooters and stuff like that. Like, I bet you there's something in there where it's just like, no, I need to go out doing something. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, I've wondered that too. Like, we've talked about this before, but like I like to ponder like what's going on through crazy people's minds, right? Serial killers, mass shooters and stuff, because I find it fascinating. And you have to wonder, like, is this one of these things where these people want to die because they've like accepted death, but yeah, like you said, they want to go out with a bang? Is that really it? Or is there like, is it like something snapped, SSRIs? You never know. But like sometimes you have to wonder if it's really just that they're just like, yep, this has gotten too weird for me, I'm gonna go like, you know, have one big last crescendo and call it. I don't know. But I mean, regardless, we just aren't meant to deal with all of the information that we're constantly getting all the time, and it's affecting our brains.
Yeah. Oh my God. I was just talking today about like the whole Israel Hamas thing. Mm-hmm. This is a really, really weird time because, you know, 20 years ago, everybody was just like, no, Israel, like just Israel. Well, now this dichotomy has like created divides within the standard divide. Yeah. You know, left, right, liberal, conservative, masculine, feminine, whatever you want to call it. There are now divides within that where they're at each other's throats. Like, it really is an insanely weird time right now. And I think a lot of that does have to do with this influx of information where like it's gonna get to the point where it's not just the skeptics, but everybody is going to be like, I can't believe any of this. I need to start inward and look to like the things just around me and reestablish a truth there. I really think that's what's going to happen.
Yeah. Did you see it's circulating? I just saw it today. It's circulating on the web. like Gen Z kids are reading Osama bin Laden's letter to America.
Yes, I saw that, and they're like, "Yep, no, that I get it."
Yeah, they're like, I'd feel that way if I was him. Like they're empathetic to someone that like was the 2000s Hitler, you know, like the evil opposition. And so like all these boomers and Gen X and millennials are like, what are you talking about? Like, you guys are crazy. And it's like, no, they're disconnected from the situation. They don't have emotional tie to it because they weren't alive yet. And they're reading it with empathy. And they're trying to understand this person's point of view. Like, and it just shows how brainwashed the rest of you are. Like, I'm not saying that, like, what the terrorists did was good, but, like, you can certainly see where they come from if you put yourself in that position. Ron Paul had a great speech about it. About, like, if there was a Chinese military base in Texas and those guys occasionally went out on patrol and ran over an American civilian, Americans would be pissed. They would demand that Chinese base get torn down and force them to leave. And it's like, so put yourself in their position. Like, that's literally what was going on in the Middle East forever, you know, before all of that went down, was America basically meddling where it shouldn't have been. So, yeah, man, I think people are kind of waking up, but
yeah, and I guess that's one decent thing about the massive spread of information. You know, I think our generation, hopefully, like millennials, is one of the last ones that has to deal with that. Like, oh, I'm just confused. I don't know what to believe. And like the younger kids, if that's the case, they can be like, no, I get all sides. So what I'm going to do is just not be a dickhead.
Right. Right. And that may play out to be a really good thing. You know, something else I was thinking of today to tie it back into what we were just talking about before that. I think that when millennials finally are the majority generation in Congress, we're going to start to see a lot more regulations put in place on things like electronics and the internet. And the reason I think that is boomers didn't get the internet until they were in their like 30s. And so it's totally foreign to them. They were already fully matured when they got it. Millennials got it when we were like 11 to 15 years old, like that.
Oh God, range. You don't even mean boomers then. You mean Gen X. Boomers didn't get that shit till they were like 50 or 60. Well, although a lot of people use the term boomer to refer to Gen X, but
I was gonna say my dad's 63 and he's a boomer. He was born in 1960. He was 30 in the 90s. He was 30 in 90. So like, yeah, I mean, like, I guess what I mean is late boomers and early Gen X, right? You know, they kind of all merged together, but yeah. So yeah, but millennials, our generation, we grew up on the internet at a certain age, right? Like, we weren't born with a computer in our house, most of us.
Right. It was like 10, 12 for me, I think, getting into the internet.
Yeah, basically around that time. But Gen Z, they grew up with that shit. They were raised on tablets and shit. So like they have no frame of reference, neither do the boomers. Our generation is the only generation that really gets that it's like, oh, this actually made an impact. Like, this definitely had an effect on our brains, like, over the long term. Because we can remember. No, you know what?
Some of Gen Z does too. I saw a video the other day of a Gen Z kid who was like, I'm not raising my fucking kids with a tablet in front of them. He's like, I go to a restaurant and like I see these kids with their noses in their phones and I'm like, holy shit, you sound like a boomer, but you're right.
Yep. Yeah, man. I mean, it is weird. It is definitely a drug. We've talked about that before. It's a constant, like,
dopamine hits. Yeah.
Dopamine hits. It's escapism. Like, it's like
I don't want to think about my life right now. So I'm going to go, make a post and hopefully get a bunch of likes and feel good about myself for doing nothing, really.
Right. I would like to avoid all original thoughts if I could for the next, few years of my life. Yeah, it's weird, man. But like, I definitely think that like there's gonna be some changes coming down the line because I think we're gonna realize this shit is not good for us, and maybe things will kind of even out. But right now, it is a huge. I think it's a huge issue. Like, I remember going out into the woods, going on hikes, being on deployment, and not having electronics and just sleeping better, being less anxious, being more like just like focused on like being able to contemplate things. It definitely plays a factor. So, you know, if you could reduce that in your life, that'd be great. But like, it is hard to do. I imagine it's like, oh, if I just stay off electronics, get a dumb phone, you know, it's like, okay, well, now you're disconnected from everything.
Right. I mean, we have formed, you know, as much as they are, we have formed certain relationships with people exclusively online, and that's kind of what makes it difficult. Right.
Like, yeah, and that's what our mutual friend said. He's like, I like our group chats. He's like, I couldn't give those up. And I couldn't either, me personally. Like, I couldn't either because, like, the majority of my friends live in different parts of the country. Like, I've picked up friends along my life in different places.
What would be an interesting experiment, actually, is, for again, like that one person you said who just gave it up for a month. So, like, for a month, the people you have group chats with get their addresses, and everybody starts writing letters to each other.
Whoa. That would be cool.
Because not only, like, yeah, you wouldn't be able to have a conversation like we're having right now where it's back and forth, but a lot of thought would go into the letter, and in turn, a lot of thought would go into reading the letter and constructing a thoughtful response, but it's all constrained.
Yeah.
I think that would be, honestly, a really cool thing to do.
I agree. That's cool. We should try that.
We should try that.
Yeah. Yeah.
We can call it here. It'll be a somewhat short one, but like...
Yeah, I mean, I just kind of feel like, you know, that's all that can be really said on the subject.
Yeah, and we divert. Well, we always diverge from the original thing, but
yeah,
that was
it's still all tied together.
Yeah, oh, it always is. That's what I'm good for.
Beautiful. All right, I'm gonna hit finish.